We're here to talk today about, NBC just had what I think is one of the most amazing announcements of the season, or of this year. And so, Aaron, we'd love to hear a little bit about kind of what you announced recently and what NBC UX is.
Sure. And thanks for having me. So we announced, I guess, last week the launch of NBC UX for linear television, which is effectively a programmatic television initiative. But I think it helps to give a little bit of context in terms of what we've been thinking about with respect to programmatic and audience-based buying over the course of the last couple of years. We look at everything through the lens of how can we help our clients reach their target audiences at scale within premium video content. And so in order to do that, we've created a set of products that are more a function of the capabilities of the respective platforms that the products belong to. So we have a programmatic digital product that helps our clients reach their target audiences in both display, mobile, and also now video, digital video inventory. We have an addressable product called NBCU Plus, where we can reach addressable audiences within VOD inventory. We've had a linear product in the marketplace since last year called Audience Targeting Platform, which I'll talk about a little more today in terms of how that juxtaposes with our recent programmatic television announcement. And we have a product called Social Sync, which is how do we reach audiences across social media platforms. Now that's an alphabet soup of products. And to some degree, in an ideal world, and we'll probably talk more about this as we go, because I know Jason's company is really focused on cross-screen targeting. To a large degree, it's a function of the capabilities of these respective platforms, right? In digital, you can target at an impression level. In television, you cannot today target at an impression level outside the VOD inventory space, which is a relatively small amount of inventory relative to what you get over linear television. And so last week we announced a programmatic television initiative. And really the focus with our programmatic television initiative is born out of a lot of what we've learned with the products we had created to date, which is, again, principal focus on reaching audiences at scale across all of our inventory. So I think the key components of what we're doing is A, we are making all of our inventory across all of our broadcast and cable networks available to be planned against in a programmatic way, and we'll get more into exactly what that means in a moment. Principally because in order to achieve scale, you have to provide scale. So this isn't about, gee, we're going to make one of our cable networks overnight inventory available. Like that doesn't really do anything for our clients. It doesn't really do anything for us. And so we've been hearing pretty loud and clear over the past 2 years that there are a couple things that are really important to our clients. One, and I guess to some degree this depends on whether you're a client or an agency. One is automation of the process of buying and selling of television. And two is the ability to leverage data to do audience-based targeting. And so the product that we've created and launched, we believe pretty strongly addresses both of those issues and been good response so far.
Yeah, I think that's, from a difference versus I think a lot of other things out there. One, making everything available, I think is pretty different. It's not just taking a piece of what, piece of inventory and making, some slice of something you don't sell well available. You made everything available. And so what was the decision behind deciding to make everything available to the, key customers of yours who want to use programmatic?
So I laugh because it started with a conversation probably about 1.5 years ago with Linda Yaccarino, who runs sales at NBC Universal, and we started talking about, well, what if we made Chiller or Clue programmatically available? And so we spent a lot of time literally going through the math of what would it look like to reach the kind of target audiences and what sort of scale could you achieve. And there were a series of conversations. I mean, we've been working at this for many months to get both talking to clients, but also to our senior sales executives to get them comfortable with the fact that their inventory might be sold in a different way. And so, the things that I think are being addressed through this and, that were potentially of concern is how do you create sort of, let's call it price parity between an audience-based target and let's call it a contextually based target. how do you protect how we package our inventory. Everything from the most premium stuff, Sunday Night Football, Jimmy Fallon, award shows, et cetera, to across all the day parts of our networks and how we package that inventory. And so we spent a lot of time thinking about how that would work, both from a packaging standpoint in terms of what would happen if we actually offered all of our inventory, and what would happen when we started getting plans back and that were audience targeted. I think it's fair to say that you don't know what you don't know going into this. Like, we will see stuff that we probably didn't anticipate or couldn't have anticipated. And I think that we've been fairly straightforward with our clients that when you launch something that's this relatively new, you've got to go through an iterative process, and you should expect that there are going to be things that you didn't expect going into it. And I think, having sat through a couple of the panels here today and knowing a lot of people in the room already that have been in this industry for some, might say longer than they want to admit, when you launch new products, there are things that are going to happen that you don't anticipate going in. And I think that, both us and our clients need to be on the same page in terms of this is going to be a learning process that we go through together. And I think that we've seen, and what we've done in our programmatic, particularly on the video side so far, has been incredibly beneficial, where we've had clients/agencies that really lean in and work with us and are learning every step of the way, and both of us auto-correcting on the fly in terms of things that we're figuring out as we see how their audiences align with our pockets of inventory.
I think it's pretty kind of an amazing kind of lean in, and I guess one of the questions too that we've had, or that I'm wondering how you've had, is it just about data and using data to buy smarter, or is it about automation, or a mix of both? And there's also, I feel like in the industry here, a lot of us, there's still in the programmatic TV space a lot of manual stuff in the background. How automated are you trying to make this?
Yep. So, from our client, and particularly from an agency perspective, a lot of what we were hearing was, and you can go back to some of the Magna pronouncements from a couple of years ago, where programmatic was actually more a proxy for automation than it was data at that time. And so there was a lot of focus, and remains a lot of focus, particularly on the agency side, about how do you automate the process of buying television. I would say, for us at least, going into the process of developing the product, that was less of our focus. Not necessarily that we weren't going to satisfy that on behalf of the agencies, but in terms of what we might see in cost savings on the automation side. I'll come back to that in a moment, because we learned some interesting things along the way. But second, the data piece is critically important. I mean, we're seeing more and more of it. Clearly, there's even a conference about it, apparently. And so, to the extent that we could satisfy in it, and we realize that it's a little bit of a chicken and an egg. Like, there is a programmatic TV space. It is a relatively nascent space. It has today consisted of sort of local MVPD and broadcast inventory, and to some degree that's a little bit of an unwired network business as much as it is an audience targeted business. But one of the things as we began to develop this product, and we literally looked at a step-by-step how are television plans created, from the point of client calling up and saying, I have a budget, to getting to order. And we had a long flow chart of how many steps actually went in, how many manual steps were incorporated. And I was personally surprised that once we actually went through the process of, okay, how would this work on a programmatic basis, that literally half of those steps disappeared. And so that was unanticipated on our side. Now I sort of, I guess I'm more empathetic of the pain that the agencies were expressing, because there's a mirror on their side in terms of how efficient the process can become on their side. Now, how that ultimately manifests itself in terms of affecting our business, it's too early to say, but it's a good first indicator of how ultimately effective and efficient introducing this automation can be to our business.
And I think there's huge potential on both sides, and I think it will be a huge learning kind of curve over the next kind of year or two as this unfolds in the ecosystem. But speaking just from NBC, how do you look at like context versus audience, and then how does this play in? Is this how does this play relative to those two?
Sure. So for obvious reasons, we believe that context is incredibly important. We spend an extraordinary amount in investment in our programming, and we firmly believe that there's a correlation to having clients' advertising being immersed either in commercial time or actually in our programs in some way, and having a beneficial effect of being adjacent to or within premium programming. And I think to a large degree we've heard from our clients over and over again, those who are participating in sort of audience-based buying, that they're having a very difficult time in being able to scale audiences against premium content and premium viewability, let's call it, and we'll get back to the viewability question in a moment. So we believe very strongly in that. I think I was thinking about this the other day because when we did some of the original press, and I think maybe it was Mike Shields wrote in the Journal something about this offers clients potentially the ability to cherry pick. And we've been asked that question since sort of the beginning of time in developing these products. And I sort of look at it in a different way, which is, we've effectively created a cherry orchard. And we've spent a lot of money and investment in building really premium fruit in that orchard. And so, if we're going to allow clients to come in and start picking, that's great. We've spent a lot of money and we want them to pick our fruit. I'm less concerned about this notion that somebody's going to come in and take one specific tiny piece of inventory out of the entire pool. I think by exposing the entire pool, it's a way for us to merchandise all of our inventory in a way that hasn't necessarily been represented in the way that programmatic's been bought and sold to date.
Right. And I think, as we, a ton of potential here, and as we move in the direction towards, using audience to decision, and have you seen kind of interest on first-party data or ask for your own data and how those two play together?
Yep.
Or is it all of the above that kind of goes into this, and basically advertisers get to leverage a number of different channels to make this effective?
It's a mix. So last year we introduced a product called Audience Targeting Platform. The principal theory behind that product was and has been that we've created effectively our own DMP, which is something we call Audience Studio, within which we house Comcast first-party set-top box data, and other forms of first-party data across the company, everything from Fandango to Universal Parks to Hispanic to, you can think about all the properties that NBC Universal has access to and the audience we have access to that can be housed within there. And leveraging that to support creating optimizations against upfront plans. This programmatic TV product is to some degree a mirror of that, which is we are enabling, and perhaps more synonymous with how digital has been bought programmatically. We're enabling the clients to bring their own data. And we are effectively providing the inventory through which they can create their own plans using that data. Now, the first iteration of this will not incorporate any of our own first-party data. There's a few reasons why, which I'm happy to get into. But I would expect at some future iterations that we'll also incorporate the first-party data into that as well.
I think it's, and then as you look at kind of the ways in which people are using data, I think we're seeing a lot in the ecosystem of using data not just to buy audience, but using data to be smart in how you complement your cross-screen initiatives. Be smart in kind of what you buy in TV versus what you bought in digital versus who you're reaching in TV. I guess as you look at this, do you see cross-screen within your company becoming more and more important?
Yep.
And how do you look at the different forms of your mediums and how they're growing, and how does this play into allowing certain flexibilities that were maybe on one now allowing
Sure.
on another?
So there's a couple things going on. One is we've been incredibly focused on cross-screen for the last several years, and really promoting that video, wherever it happens to be playing, has similar characteristics, and the ad experiences have similar characteristics. So for example, the latest stat in terms of our digital video, and this goes up every time I look at it, is 72% of our digital video is consumed on a television set. And so the ad experience there, where you can't fast forward a commercial, and it's probably the premium ad experience you're going to get for commercial inventory. And so we've spent a lot of effort, and a lot of clients have come with us along the way to sell cross-screen. That being said, there is a reason why we have this sort of alphabet soup of different products, because the respective capabilities of these platforms, particularly from an audience buying perspective, are different. And so we need to sort of create the best possible application of that audience data to these respective platforms. I would hope that in the future they'll become more synonymous. I don't know that that may be unrealistic to some degree. They'll probably get closer because the technology to deliver them are quite significantly different. But look, from a client perspective, we're looking to fulfill their objectives holistically across all of the different inventory pools that are available to us and to them.
And I think as we move into this kind of new era at TubeMogul, I feel like we spend just as much time dealing with like measurement as we do with just execution. How are you guys kind of leaning? Are you guys facing what new measurements required or advancements are needed as we kind of move into this more audience-centric stuff on linear?
So this is a theme that our chairman of sales, Linda Yaccarino, likes to harp on, that measurement needs to get better. I'm sure Dave Morris probably would have something to say about that as well. Look, I mean, I think when you're starting to buy audiences that are not the typical Nielsen demos, and the audiences have been constructed as a function of I'm trying to reach this specific target. It might be I'm retargeting people who have been on my online store, or I'm retargeting people who use Listerine, or whatever it is. The metric of how you measure the effectiveness of delivering that audience changes naturally, right? Like you've actually created a real fine cut of who those people are, and you want to measure, did we reach those people? And so, I think we're at an extremely nascent stage of having the capability to do that. And I'll also say that, I find that, and even in the discussions and the panels that I've heard today, a lot of the focus in this industry has been on the front-end targeting. And there's, not to discredit what's going on in the back end, but there's a lot less discussion about what are the actual results and how to measure the actual results in terms of sales, or in terms of whatever the respective KPIs are. And I think, to some degree, in terms of the way the industry has evolved, if you sort of look at particularly on the programmatic digital side, where clients have been relatively opaque in terms of what their targets have been. And I understand there's a rationality to that, because it sort of potentially creates disadvantages with respect to negotiating price. At the same time, if we don't understand as a publisher what their KPIs are, it makes it very difficult and perhaps inhibiting to deliver against those KPIs. And I think to the degree, and one of the things we're trying to promote in this programmatic TV offering is that we want to be really, and even in audience targeting platform, very transparent about what are you trying to achieve, so we can leverage all of the potential assets that we have to try and get there. And to go back to my earlier point about this being iterative, you can't measure and change and continue to evolve the product if you're not understanding what your success metrics are. And so, to fly blind on one side and have opacity in terms of what the clients are trying to achieve doesn't really help us to help the clients. I think we've found a lot of receptivity to those points, and hoping to evolve more, particularly on the measurement of measuring the results ultimately, not just the delivery.
And do you think, I've personally found that a lot of what I see in digital, you almost have too much data sometimes, and people, and maybe not the best experimentation or test and learn, in true experiment design. Do you think as we kind of lean in and allow some of these approaches to buying and measuring to be done on TV, do you feel like there's things that will be surfaced in the digital models that are a little bit broken in the way kind of some of the in the way some of the conversion or attribution systems, I feel like a little bit overcredit digital sometimes versus TV, or very digital focused in the way they do attribution.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think these have been issues that are been prevalent in the industry for some amount of time. Even the question of attribution in digital has been a challenging issue for some period of time. And so, now that you start to have audience-based buying in the television world, how do you create attribution models? Like, who's getting credit for the sale? Particularly if you have a client that's running campaigns across multiple networks and multiple screens. And so, that's going to be a challenge. And, I can sit here with some degree of certainty and say I don't have the answers today, but I think, a lot of this has to be with, going back to my original point, is there needs to be consolidated work with the clients to sit down and understand what the objectives are and start to try and articulate how we're going to measure them. And I think, both on an industry level and just sort of an individual client-publisher relationship, to be able to try and establish what those are. I think it's just too simple to some degree, like what's occurred in the digital space, this last click attribution and how the retargeting industry has evolved. Doesn't solve for a lot of the brand advertising challenges that are going to be, the critical ones, particularly in the television world.
No, I absolutely agree, and I think that I think as we get more measurement in this space, I think the promise of what's happening, and almost has to happen, is a little bit of kind of breaking some of the silos. Like there's a lot of silos that exist and don't, and sometimes don't work together. And so this, I do think measuring things holistically, buying things in a more, in maybe a similar fashion, or at least having the option to actually bring some of this stuff together. How do you think, as you look at a more traditional buy, maybe a demo-based buy versus a more maybe data-focused buy, how do you feel like people will benchmark these differently? Or do you see, what do you think those benchmarks might be?
My expectation is that there'll be a lot more, how can we say, critical focus on the audience-based buys than there have been on the demo-based buys. Yeah. And I think that's a function, again, of legacy of how the programmatic industry has evolved, and let's call it the scrutiny under which you can evaluate an audience-based buy. And that's okay. I think we're comfortable with that. I think, again, it goes back to these measurement issues of how do you want to judge ultimately the effectiveness, and how are you comparing one versus the other. In a contextual buy, if you're buying adults 18 to 49 and you got your audience delivery, is that good enough? Yeah. And it may very well be, and that's okay. And so, are the audience-based buys going to be held to the same sort of standard? Was I trying to reach luxury auto buyers and I reached them, and is that good enough? Or did they convert? Did you get them into a showroom? Did they buy something? Like, how did it drive sales? I think, the level of scrutiny certainly appears to be far greater with audience-based buying. And that's a good thing. I think it's a good thing for the industry, and it's a good thing for the clients. And it's, I think that, ultimately we're comfortable, certainly, at our company, being held accountable to those standards, and feel like the inventory and opportunity, the marketing opportunities we have available are going to hold up really well against those types of metrics.
Got it. I feel like, so I've kind of gone through the things I had to ask, but I do think what you guys are doing is one of the more interesting things in the space, and I hopefully there's benefits on both sides, from advertisers being able to come in with more data, first-party data, their own data sets, or whatever they want to use, and then value that you guys reap in terms of getting reap through increase in demand and increase in ease of operations. Anything else you want to add before we kind of jump off here in terms of what you want to tell the folks about kind of the launching of this? Or
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, we've spent a lot of time thinking about it, and a lot of time talking to clients in terms of getting their feedback in what they're trying to achieve. Again, I'd say A, I'm really excited about it. B, I'm probably most excited about the interactions that we'll have with clients along the way, and what we can learn through the process. even going back to last year when we launched our digital video initiatives, our programmatic digital video initiatives, there's a ton in retrospect that we didn't know and that we've learned along the way that have helped influence the shaping of this product. And so, as we go along the way, I would expect that it will continue in that fashion, and the next iteration of this or even the next product will be influenced by all the different things that we're learning. And so, I think that we're really excited to lean in with clients and want to talk to them more and get feedback and
Great. So reach out to the NBC team if you're interested. Thank you, Aaron, for joining us today to talk more about what you're doing. Thank you, guys. I'm Jason Lopatecki from TubeMogul. Thank you.